Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Well, if investors in the Walt Disney Company were looking for a surprise, they certainly got it. Disney posted fiscal fourth quarter sales and profit that beat Wall Street estimates. And here's the kicker. Forecast earnings growth for the next, not one, not two, but 3 years, which is a rare event for a company that historically hasn't made long-range profit projections. The stock up almost 12% at its highs today. Tim, still up about 6.6%.
Yeah, the company's film studio and streaming business drove earnings. Check out Disney CFO Hugh Johnson weighing in on streaming earlier on at Bloomberg TV.
We feel optimistic about, as the industry is coming together, we're going to continue to both add subscribers, and in addition to that, because of the value we're delivering with the great IP and the great product that we're putting into this service, we'll be able to take pricing as well. And that combined with good cost management that we have in place in terms of good disciplines on that business, we feel very optimistic about where streaming is going for us.
Well, there you have it. Disney CFO Hugh F. Johnson earlier on Bloomberg saying he feels very optimistic about where streaming is going. Disney shares, by the way, soaring by the most in nearly 4 years on an intraday basis, right now higher by about 6.8%.
Yeah, but definitely a significant move. Let's get more on the magic being back in parts of the Magic Kingdom. Back with us is Bloomberg Intelligence technology and media analyst Geetha Ranganathan. She joins us from BI headquarters over there in Princeton, New Jersey. Geetha, good to have you here with us. First up, it is a surprise, right?
Huge surprise, Carol. We never really expected them to lay out guidance the way they did.
Why do you think they did this? I mean, there's a lot to, it's hard to see the future for any company a couple quarters. Why take that risk and go out on a limb and say, this is what we think it's going to look like 2-3 years from now?
Yeah. Because I think the biggest story for Disney over the past few quarters, Tim, has been kind of this lack of certainty. It's been the lack of visibility into so many different parts of their business, most notably the parks business, because we've seen kind of demand moderate pretty significantly. And I think there was a lot of concern amongst investors that that is going to weigh really badly on earnings in 2025. And so we saw them kind of guiding to, high single-digit EPS growth and also pretty robust park growth, high single-digit operating income at the parks as well, which is actually an acceleration from 2024. So it kind of looks like things are really clearing up. And then in terms of, laying out the long-term guidance, it just tells us that they really have all of these multiple growth levers in place. You look at the streaming business, of course, profitability was a huge concern there. They've finally kind of turned the tide there. And then studios, which had a whole bunch of misfires and, underwhelming performances, finally has delivered 2 back-to-back hits with Inside Out and Deadpool, both of those films making $3 billion at the global box office. And then you just look at the lineup and it's fabulous.
So what did Bob Iger do to right this ship?
There was a lot of course correction that was needed, Carol, especially at the content division, most notably at the film studio. We know what had happened. The pandemic obviously had shut down everything. The theatrical business was down in the dumps. They were prioritizing their streaming business, but greenlighting shows like crazy. And in that whole race for, quantity, quality kind of got sacrificed a lot. And it also led to a lot of, confusion, I think, amongst viewers because you had so many different Star Wars series, so many different Marvel series. Nobody knows what's going on. None of the storylines are clear. And so they kind of really had to take a step back and press the reset button a little bit. And that's exactly what they've done. And I think it's paying off big time.
I've got to say, I was over Marveled. Like, I kind of had to step back. I was kind of all in. My daughter got me hooked. I was
Too many
watching
superheroes?
kind of the offshoots in the series. And I was like, now, not quite jumping the shark, but it felt a little bit like it.
Okay, I do want to talk, Geetha, a little bit about the direct-to-consumer business and hear from you about how they were able to go well above Wall Street estimates, posting this profit of $321 million in the period.
So with the direct-to-consumer business, yes, they've suffered huge losses over the past 2 years, over $6.5 billion. So investors were really looking for some clarity in terms of profits. And really, most of the levers that they've pulled so far, Tim, have been on the cost side. So whether it's content costs, as well as marketing and other technological costs, they've really kind of pared back on that. Going forward, though, the profit story is not going to be driven. I mean, of course, it is going to be driven by more cost efficiencies, but really the growth driver there is going to be on the revenue side. And the way that they get the revenue kind of pumped up is through price increases, through growing their advertising business, through cracking down on password sharing, kind of really taking a page out of the Netflix playbook.
What about, though, I thought it was interesting that the CFO Johnston, suggested that Disney wouldn't consider a similar path in terms of what we're seeing from someone like a Comcast, which is considering spinning off its cable networks into a new company. He still sees, Johnston, the CFO of Disney, an important integration between linear TV and streaming. Like, they still get it. Is there something special in the Disney mix that enables them to do something that others cannot?
So Disney does have a unique collection of assets. I mean, I think the big one there really is ESPN, Carol, and ESPN has been the glue that has held not just the Disney bundle together, it's held kind of the whole TV ecosystem together in many ways. So obviously they want to play it cool. They want to make sure that, the ESPN subscriber base is definitely protected. But I think all bets are off the table come summer of 2025, because that's when you have flagship ESPN. So you have a standalone ESPN product coming to the market. And once they're able to get that off the ground and running really well, then I think they're going to come back and revisit this whole question on what they want to do with their TV network business.
Okay, more on Disney Plus. I'm going to go there. Bluey. I just wonder how important.
Someone has little ones at home.
I just wonder how important Bluey is to Disney Plus and the missed opportunity that Disney has, not having the rights to it, to create theme park attractions around Bluey.
Super important, right? Bluey was one of their most viewed properties ever. I mean, more than so many of the big Disney movies. Just been a home run for them. And yeah, it would have been really great to have some theme park rides kind of associated with that. Having said that, though, Tim, I mean, they have so much more that we have to look forward to on the theme park business. Remember, they are investing $60 billion over a span of 10 years, and it's not just at the parks; it's also in cruise ships, vacation properties all across the board. So yeah, while Bluey is a little bit of a disappointment, I think they have other levers that they can pull.
All right, so does this mean Bob Iger
sticks
around a little longer?
Maybe.
Oh, no, are you serious?
I mean, publicly they've said that he's going to leave in 2026. I think this time he actually leaves for real. I mean, it looks like James Gorman has kind of his eyes set on finding a suitable successor. They're looking, of course, internally at all the section chiefs, whether that's Josh DeMauro, Jimmy Pitaro, Dana Walden. But they're also now broadening that scope to look externally as well. So I think they are going to get the right person for the job, and hopefully Iger can finally leave.
Great stuff, as always. Thank you so much. Geetha, be well. Bloomberg Intelligence Technology and Media Analyst Geetha Ranganathan joining us right there from our BI headquarters in Princeton, New Jersey.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
President-elect Donald Trump has been definitely fast and furious in filling out his list of nominees for top cabinet and administration posts. As he names names, one qualification continues to jump out, and that is loyalty.
With more, let's get to a Bloomberg News senior reporter covering U.S. foreign policy, Iain Marlow. Iain joins us from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Iain, the naming process for members of his cabinet for his administration, too, they've poured out rapidly. Give us an idea of the one trait that at this point is clear, it's evident, one actually needs in order to serve in the next Trump administration.
Yeah, we kind of saw this last time with the parade of people who came through, obstructed him, got in fights, and then were fired and wrote kind of tell-all books about their White House experience. This time around, it is loyalty first. And these appointees, some of them nominations, some of them were floated. These people have a wide range of ideological views, some quite interesting picks, some of which have surprised, the foreign policy and national security establishment here in D.C. But the one thing that they all do have in common is fighting for Trump, doing it on TV, doing it well, and if they ever had a disagreement with him, they've made their peace and and kind of come round, basically. So that's the one thing that's sort of uniting all of these picks, and which has led us to some kind of very peculiar ones. In particular, his defense secretary, who the headlines around here were, "Who is this guy?" Pete Hegseth, for example.
Obviously they're not weekend viewers of Fox and Friends, or else they'd know who he was.
So before we get into that, though, Iain, I want to take a step back, devil's advocate a little bit. Many would say, hey, listen, every administration has loyalists and people who have been on the campaign trail and stumped, for the candidate, now then president. So, I mean, there's a fair amount of that, but you're saying this is just on a whole other level?
Yeah, I think it's just this time around, I think there's a lot of people who, he's broken with people over the past couple of years, in particular over January 6th. There were the Never Trumpers and others. I think this time around, he's really reached into Congress in particular, with Matt Gaetz, his nomination for Attorney General, Mike Waltz, his pick for National Security Advisor, people who he views as just effective effective people for his ideas and his agenda. It's been difficult as a Republican in Congress and elsewhere to oppose Trump's agenda. He can kind of give the kiss of life or kiss of death for your campaign or election prospects in some of these cases. But people made this point to me over the past few months. A president has the right to pick who he wants to choose, and I think a lot of people last time around stood in his way when he tried to implement some of these ideas that he had. A lot of Democrats find these views, and these policies, offensive. But whether it's deporting lots of people or pursuing other policies in the Mideast and elsewhere. But it's his prerogative as president, and a lot of people around this town, especially with the mandate that he got this time around, think it's his due right. So no one's kind of standing in his way. I think there's just a bit of surprise at who some of these picks are, and some of them not all coming in with a long sort of backlog of experience in some of the departments they're being named to head.
And you have to wonder if that's going to come to head at all in the Senate in the confirmation process, which we're going to get to in just a second. But as you're speaking, I'm reminded of some of the folks in the first administration who did at first appear incredibly loyal, but then did see stuff that they didn't approve of and chose not to endorse the president-elect the second time, or the third time he ran, I should say. Somebody like Mike Pence, for example, who spent 4 years being a loyal vice president, but ultimately post-January 6th did not support the president-elect. And I wonder if there will be situations like that once again, not necessarily a direct corollary to what happened to Mike Pence, but people who start out loyal and then might have a change of heart, or if these folks are different.
Yeah, that's very true. And Trump likes to keep people on their toes. And so to some degree, having that sort of friction, I think, is going to be inevitable. There's going to be disagreements. There's going to be some infighting. There's going to be leaks and positioning. One thing people did point out to me was that he came out as part of this process publicly kind of said, I'm not going to choose Mike Pompeo. I'm not going to choose Nikki Haley, people who had crossed him, over the course of the last couple of years. And, it's quite astonishing to come out and rule certain people out rather than ruling people in. That's not usually what you do. So, that's also caught some people off guard and kind of hence reinforcing this sort of loyalty factor. He really does want people around him who are going to help, push that agenda forward. And, in this town in Washington, when he came into power in 2016, there wasn't necessarily that MAGA infrastructure in place. And in the years since, there's all sorts of, think tanks, organizations that have sprung up to sort of offer forth the personnel, the people, the policy wonks who support some of these ideas. That the Project 2025 stuff, which was controversial on the campaign trail, but is literally a booklet of policies written by people who would potentially serve in his administration if they were picked. And
just to head off any of the hate mail or bad tweets we're going to get from people saying, well, wait a minute. This isn't just Trump foes who are saying this about the loyalty thing. There are some Republicans even scratching their heads about some of these names that are being nominated by the president-elect.
Yeah, I think in particular, I mean, there is, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, people have been saying, least qualified candidate to lead the Pentagon, in history. Bolton has said some things which probably wouldn't be surprising to many viewers. And Matt Gaetz in particular is the one that I think has a lot of Republicans, especially in the Senate, scratching their heads. When reporters were asking, Republican senators yesterday, there was a lot of, surprise. Some people chortled, some people were kind of just aghast, and a lot of them promised there's going to be a lot of questions in this confirmation hearing. And so it's unclear who's going to make it through. Obviously, the Republicans control the Senate, but the Senate has, as people have said, is tradition bound and looks out for its own to some degree. So there could be some pushback from that, from some of the even some of the Republicans in that institution.
What would you say is the strategy that Donald Trump has in floating these names right now? Is there something bigger going on than just actually picking the folks he thinks would be best for these positions? Is there a chance that Matt Gaetz won't make it through the nomination process for the Senate, the confirmation process for the Senate, and that other things are going on here?
Yeah, exactly. There's been, there's a lot of, things swirling around D.C. at the moment. But, some people, to some degree, view Gaetz as a potential sacrificial lamb, someone who, the Democrats are going to want to pull down. And once that's done, others will slip through. There's a sense maybe that he's kind of, capturing attention, media attention again with some kind of, surprise picks that are generating a lot of headlines, a lot of head scratching, and just getting, some momentum and sort of media attention for the campaign. So it's not, it's not entirely clear. I think there's a lot of people wondering, there's some people in particular pointing out the sort of pro-Israel, credentials that some of the picks have, including his picks for Middle East envoy Mike Huckabee, for ambassador to Israel Elise Stefanik, his envoy to the United Nations. And so some people are reading into that, what kind of policy he would have. We know there's going to be, a renewal of maximum pressure on Iran, for instance. There's some sentiment out there that in the interregnum between now and January 20th that Israel will have a freer hand to potentially strike Iran. We don't know about that, but Trump has had a few calls with the Israeli Prime Minister, since he won the election and in recent weeks. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of people are trying to sort of overlay ideological lenses on top of some of these appointments. It's not clear how much of this is sort of the chaos that a lot of people remember from the first Trump administration, and how much of it is a sort of more calculated, reflective sort of approach to the type of cabinet he wants to assemble.
Hey, I am wondering, while all of this is happening, Iain, your beat, U.S. foreign policy, who is in what post could possibly determine, whether or not other countries are sharing intelligence with us, whether or not they feel comfortable enough doing it. What are the possible implications about who ultimately lands in these seats, especially when it comes to security, national security, U.S. intelligence, foreign policy? What are the possible implications? Who is in these seats ultimately when it comes to the foreign policy stage?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, these foreign policy institutions, I'm at the State Department often. They are big beasts, and turning foreign policy around can sometimes be like turning a giant, freighter around, mid-ocean to some degree. But some of the picks we've seen, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, I was looking at some tweets of hers the other day. She has one, talking about Pearl Harbor and a fear of Japan rearming. There's a lot of views. Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, has talked about, is allowing Israel to annex parts of the West Bank, which is, very much against the current U.S. policy. There's a lot of views out there from some of these people. It might be a bit of a fool's errand to try and pick individual comments from some of these characters and attribute them kind of forward-looking to potential Trump administration policy. These institutions like the State Department and others, they do have a tendency of sort of they're a bit of a moderating influence to some degree. I mean, there is some tradition, there is some policy here that they have to adhere to, yeah.
All right, good to know. Iain Marlow, Bloomberg News senior reporter covering U.S. foreign policy.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
You know who is thinking about the next year and a half or the next 4 years is Meta. We want to get to the possibility of Meta being in the crosshairs of Donald Trump's second term.
Yeah, because in case you didn't notice, it's been a tough week for Meta platforms since the election. So writes our own Kurt Wagner. So off to Denver we go into Bloomberg News technology reporter Kurt Wagner, who's there standing by. He's also the author of Battle for the Bird, Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk, and the $44 billion fight for Twitter's soul. So, Kurt, about 1 week since the election, remind everybody where Mark Zuckerberg sort of sits in terms of the Elon Musk universe and the Donald Trump universe.
Yeah. Well, Elon, I would say, is one of his biggest nemeses. He's someone who, has sparred with him, not literally, unfortunately, for all of us. You may remember that there was supposed to be some type of
cage match, right?
The cage match never happened.
That's right. The cage match never happened, but it hasn't stopped those two from kind of trading insults, trading criticisms over time. But with Donald Trump, it's a little bit more complicated, right? Because Meta did, ban the president for 2 years after January 6th. He was brought back onto the platform, but earlier this year, he called Facebook the enemy of the people. He said one of the reasons he doesn't think TikTok should be banned is because it would help Meta, it would help Facebook, and he doesn't want to help them, right? Now, more recently, it's gotten a little bit nicer. Mark Zuckerberg has certainly attempted to do his part for that relationship. He congratulated Trump after the election victory. He called his actions after the assassination attempt badass. You may remember he said that actually with our own Emily Chang in that interview. And Trump has said he's not nearly as upset at Mark Zuckerberg as he used to be because he thinks that Meta is less involved in elections, right? So it's a complicated relationship. I point out all of that detail simply to say that we're heading into a bit of an unknown, right? Historically, these two over the last couple of years have had a lot of tension. They seem to be making a little peace, but as we know with Donald Trump, things can change very quickly.
All right, but get into the specifics. I mean, TikTok may not go away. It looks like Donald Trump backing off that. That's more competition for Meta, and it's also its X-clone threat. I mean, there's a couple of components here.
There are. So I think the biggest one is this TikTok element, right? So there's a lot of speculation now that maybe TikTok won't be banned, or at least it would be a lot harder to ban TikTok with Trump in the White House. He has been on the record publicly saying he doesn't think there should be a ban. And as a result, people are saying, well, maybe he'll try and step in and stop this thing. Well, the biggest loser in that situation is Meta, right? Because Meta stands to benefit the most if TikTok goes away. They have a TikTok clone called Reels that they do short form video on. They would, probably immediately get millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of new people just coming over to watch Reels instead of TikTok if it wasn't around. And it seems less likely that's the case. So there's one. The other, as you mentioned, is that, for a long time, the past year or so, Threads, which is Meta's kind of X clone, has been really alone as the real competitor to Elon Musk's X. Well, Blue Sky is having a moment, as you both may know, and it suddenly feels like that service has been revived too. So a lot more competition for Meta and its products today than I think there was, a week and a half ago at election time.
Okay, so that's on the one hand. On the other hand, Meta's made some moves recently that have been pretty good, you write, about the recent glasses that came out that people are actually really seeming to enjoy.
Yeah, so there are a few things. A few years ago, I'm sure you both recall, Meta came out and talked about the metaverse, right? And it was this big kind of flat landing. People were not excited. People were saying, why are you spending money on this? Why is the company pivoting towards this? There was a slow kind of recognition that perhaps Mark Zuckerberg may have been premature to that effort. Well, the more recent stuff that they've been doing is been talking about AI and talking about, these new augmented reality glasses called Orion, which we saw for the very first time in September. And these have been more of a hit, at least, initially, than I think the metaverse ever was. It's been more of a hit than I think maybe people even expected for a hardware device coming out of Meta. And so on the one hand, they're dealing with all of these issues around competition. On the other hand, they're kind of, they delivered something, or excuse me, it's not available yet, but they've unveiled something that I think a lot of people see a lot of potential in with these augmented reality glasses. And so I think that has given them a little bit more of a shot than perhaps I would have expected a few months ago.
I just you said something there that's so important. They're not actually available for sale. These are just prototypes, but the people who've actually gotten their hands on them, Kurt, they really like them. We have no idea how much these things would cost if they ever do even end up in the wild.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've actually, I got a demo of them in September. I thought that they were very cool. They're certainly not ready for mass consumption yet. They're still too thick. They're not really stylish enough for people to wear around without looking, kind of dweeby. But I think there is a path here that people see. I think I saw one analyst note when it came out that was like, is this Meta's iPhone moment, right? Like, is this the device for them? Now, to be clear, that's a huge claim. We have no idea. But the fact that that's even being floated as a possibility is a great sign for someone like Meta, who's, as you know, never really delivered like a mass mainstream hardware device before.
Hey, just a few other things I want to throw at you at the bad week that was. Some of it certainly Trump related. There's an FTC antitrust lawsuit. I also feel like, there's the story today that the company's paying, $841 million being fined by EU regulators over classified ads dominance. There's overseas regulatory issues, not necessarily a Trump issue, but other things that are going on.
It's a bit ironic, right? Before earlier in this conversation, I was talking about how they're suddenly getting more competition, perhaps from Blue Sky or TikTok sticking around. In the same week, in the same breath, they had two huge antitrust sort of losses this week. The one is that the FTC's antitrust lawsuit against Meta and progress. It will go to trial. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen at trial, but just the fact that it's still, moving its way through the court system is not what Meta wants. It's not what Meta was petitioning for. So that, is advancing. In the EU, they're similarly faced, you mentioned this $840 million fine for antitrust-related reasons. The claim is that their marketplace product, it's basically their Craigslist competitor, is attached to their social network, and so the EU regulators are saying, hey, this shouldn't have been connected. It should have been its own thing. That's an antitrust violation. They got hit with this big fine as well. So a lot of competition, and yet still getting dinged for being anti-competitive.
Hey, just quickly, 30 seconds left here. Listen, if this doesn't work out, this Meta Platforms thing doesn't work out for Zuckerberg, he can always kind of lean on his singing career, right?
Oh man, I can't believe you're going to subject all of our listeners here to bringing this up. Yes, Mark Zuckerberg has a new single. I won't go much further than that. I know. If you go listen to it, please let us know what you think about it. It is something to behold, let me tell you.
All right.
You get to the
don't
point,
leave us yet, though. You can listen to it later on.
You get to the point when you're Mark Zuckerberg, you got so much money. You do
cage
commission
fights
you commission a statue of your wife, give it to her for a gift. You do a song with T-Pain. It's fine.
Spouses and partners. That's a tough thing to beat.
This is the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.